welcome to Creative Block. We're your host, Gene.
And V. We interview people in the animation industry about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on Twitter if they had specific topics they want us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
And today with us, we have Jeff Trammell.
Hey! Hi,
Did I
Jeff.
say your name right?
You did.
I think I always say it wrong. I think I say Trammell usually. Like a fool.
You can say both. They're fine. I'm not. They're interchangeable.
No, I want to get in a fight.
Right off the bat.
Yeah. Tell me that I'm doing it wrong. Jeff, tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Jeff Trammell, or Trammell. I am the head writer on Cartoon Network's Craig of the Creek, as well as a voice actor for Craig of the Creek and the Fungies, also on HBO Max.
Man, wow.
You're doing all the shows.
I tried.
Yeah.
Cartoon Network would fall apart without you.
Yeah, they really would.
Well,
I think you let me say that, and then then you won't get in trouble. Yeah, I think you're our first head writer, which is exciting.
oh, cool.
Because I think we've had Kira, we had Brandon, both talented, but you have a different kind of set of responsibilities. I think that's worth talking about, and we'll get to that.
Cool.
But I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's very cool. But you have a very interesting journey. You have a very awesome kind of story leading up to your first gigs in animation and stuff. So tell me about Baby Jeff. Tell me about how you first got interested in animation and writing and all that.
Oh man. For anyone who's heard me on any podcast before, I apologize for hearing this story yet again. But
It's a good story.
thank you. I always start by saying that when I was a kid, I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a professional wrestler.
Hell yeah.
When I turned 16, I started wrestling professionally in Michigan on the Michigan
Columbus.
Independent Circuit. So I did that for a few years. It was very fun. It was very painful.
No kidding.
But eventually I got out of it. It was very there were a lot of politics. It was very cliquish. And it wasn't a place for me. I was already dealing with all that stuff in high school. So I was like, this is just more. So
Yeah.
I got out of that around the time I graduated high school.
I was wondering, how much time did that take out of your days? How much time did you spend, wrestling and practicing and all that?
So when I was in, I want to say I was a junior when I started. So I was in my 11th grade, and I would go to school from 8 to 3. And then I would go home and eat lunch and do homework. And then I would go to wrestling training Monday through Thursday from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Oh, wow. 10 p.m.
Yeah. So that was 4 days a week
That's
for a few months. And then also on the weekends, I would go to shows around Michigan. So I would be putting up the ring and watching the shows, and sometimes working security for those shows, if not actually working matches. So yeah, I did that for a few years. And then I finished up with that and was like, okay, well, I don't have any interest in college, so what should I do with my life? And I went to a trade school for video production. And I was like, maybe I'll be an editor or a cameraman or something. So while I was there, I started doing comedy sketches with some friends. And eventually I started watching 30 Rock, which is a show about people who write for a TV show. So I was like, okay, well, wait, no one told me this was a job. I would love to write for TV. I think I'm funny. So it was maybe there's a way I can break into this. And they also, a big influence of mine was Donald Glover, who used to do sketch comedy and then became a writer on 30 Rock. So I was like, well, if he did it, maybe there's a way I can figure out how to do this too. So I basically just downloaded a bunch of books and movie scripts and TV scripts and tried to teach myself how to write for television.
Damn, you got to work. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was, I was like, well, maybe I can make this. Maybe this is a crazy dream, but this is the only way I can, really start. And then I wrote a spec script for The Office, which is just a script of an existing show to see if you can work with those characters. And it was bad, but I wrote it, and that's the important thing.
Sure, yeah, of course.
It's so hard to just get started, let alone finish something. So after that, I was like, okay, well, I know I can do this. It's just a matter of like, how do I get out to LA? How do I start doing this? How do I make it work?
Because where did you grow up?
I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. So it's like the Midwest of America. So no there's like no entertainment industry there really. There was a time where people would go film like movies there for like a tax break, but that was kind of it, you know. There was really no like breaking into writing there.
Right.
Do you feel like maybe because you grew up in Detroit, that's the reason why you never were aware that writing could be a career?
1,000,000%.
Yeah, I mean, it's a recurring thing with people like that are on come on the show, where it's like they didn't know they could do, the job they do, which is interesting to me. That it's just like, I think for a long time, I think it's easier now because kids are exposed to so much more stuff online. But our generation, we just like didn't know. We didn't realize it.
And it's one of those things where like, as I've kind of like looked back, I'm like, oh, there's signs that I've been interested in writing. But, it's one of those things where it was like, to me, it was like, okay, well, the only thing I could write is like a novel or something. And I didn't really have any interest in writing like huge, thick books, that was never something that I was into. But now I'm like, well, with the proper motivation, I could have been pushed into writing comics, or I could have been pushed into writing, there's so many other things that never occurred to me. But yeah.
What would you say, like looking back, what would you say were there those signs for you that you were interested in writing from a younger age?
I would write a lot of short stories when I was younger, and I would read like a ton. Like, just that's all I would do for a while is read, and I would write short stories. But I don't think I knew that I could do anything with that. So I was just like, okay, well, this is like a fun thing to do, and this is kind of like, I'm done with it now, and that's kind of it. But even like,
were you thinking kind of like, oh, this is something I can do as a hobby, like instead of a was that the mindset, or was that even just something that you were just doing and not thinking about it that much?
I think it's something I was doing and not thinking about. It was like, I would be in class, not paying attention, but instead like writing my own story or, stuff like that I never really considered it as like even a hobby. I was like, okay, well, this is like a fun thing to do when I'm kind of like bored in class, but I wasn't really like picking it up, at home. Because there was video games there, so why would I?
Of course.
Would you show like friends or family any other stories that you wrote?
I would show my dad. And my dad he's the kind of guy my dad's like a major jokester. I feel like I got a lot of my like comedy stuff from him. So there's a bit in Craig of the Creek where Craig doesn't know what his dad does for a living, and his dad says he's a spy. And that's from my real life. Like, my dad wouldn't tell me what his job was, but he'd be like, oh yeah, I'm a spy. And I knew he wasn't, but he committed to the bit to where even now, I'll be like, so yeah, back in whatever time. And he'll be like, yeah, I got to keep all that stuff under wraps because I was a spy then.
Maybe he's not kidding. Maybe this is
he's not a spy.
Okay. I don't know.
I have seen this man fall so many times.
But it's all a cover, Jeff. It's an amazing cover.
It is. If he's been doing it on purpose to look like a very clumsy man, then it's working.
Yeah, right.
That's so funny. And so like kind of like, I mean, I guess it's like all in the episode of like, or like how much of that episode is inspired by your life versus like how much did you have to make up to make it work as an episode of Craig of the Creek?
A lot of stuff kind of just works. Like, a lot of those characters are really based on like people I knew growing up, or family members or friends, or like even Craig's dad is like an amalgam of my dad and like Tiffany Ford's dad. Just kind of like the way he is, and the way when we were creating him, he was kind of just like, drawing from life experiences. So that's a thing I kind of often will tell people too. Like, when you're creating those characters, it's one thing to like, just kind of make a character and be like, this is who they are. But if you can root it in like truth or kind of tie it to someone it really helps them feel more fleshed out and alive,
Yeah, that's always tough because it's like I think it's always scary to like dig into those parts of your life.
Definitely.
And but it's so helpful. It always ends up being beneficial.
And going back to the short stories that you were writing as a kid, were these kind of like also inspired by life, or were they like more like escapism or like fantasy?
A mixture of the both. Like I think I'm trying to remember some of the ones I did would be like little like mysteries, which were kind of like escapism, and then I know that one was literally just me writing another version of the film 8 Mile, but rooting it in like high school, because I grew up in Detroit and that movie's based there. So that was also a time where like when that movie came out, everyone was like doing freestyle battles after school and stuff.
That's interesting. I actually wonder. I never thought about that because I watched 8 Mile a bunch when it came out, but like. Yeah, was like Detroit really excited about that? Was that like Detroit representation?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay.
And again, like that was a time where like there wasn't a lot of stuff for Detroit, so just even seeing like the city, like I think the only other movie I can think of that's like Detroit based is like Beverly Hills Cop because he's from Detroit, and like RoboCop. So it's just cop movies.
RoboCop is not a great portrayal of Detroit. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Interesting. Okay.
Did you ever, if that became like kind of a fad after the movie, did you ever like get in one of these like freestyle?
Oh yeah, I freestyle rap battled all the time.
Oh boy.
Were you good?
I was good. I was good at it. I know everyone who raps says they were good, but I was actually good at it, and I was good enough to admit that now I suck at it. Like I didn't do it. Like I stopped doing it so long that I lost like my skills, and now I'm bad at it. But I can write a rap. I just can't come up with one off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's tough though. Yeah, it's like because I write a lot of like rap stuff for my band, but like I could never freestyle. It's a completely different.
It's so hard
skill set. Just thinking off the top of your head.
Do you feel like it's just like a muscle that you have to flex a bunch to kind of stay in
definitely.
Yeah.
It's also like because it's one thing to freestyle and it's another thing to freestyle battle because then you're like insulting someone.
Yeah.
So if you're funny and you like are quick with it, you can come up with something to kind of like get under the other person's skin, but also like you yourself are being attacked.
Yeah, you gotta really learn to take it.
Yeah.
See, here's what I never want to rap battle because I am worried I will take it too far too fast and it like won't be funny. Like everyone will just be like, dude, Gene, back up a little.
That was mean, Gene.
Yeah. Because your mom didn't want to have you, and it'll be like, oh dude, come on, man. Come on.
I wonder, okay, this might be like a little left field, but like did you guys have like a debate team in your high school? Because like, do you feel like there is like similarities between like debate and like freestyle rapping, or?
Huh.
I mean, you don't have to rhyme and debate.
Yeah,
that's
you don't
true.
Have to rhyme on a
I'm thinking more like on the like rhetoric kind of bit, because like I guess, or and like the improvisation, improv kind of.
I'm sure. Yeah, I would say it's closer to improv. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
shares that part of the brain.
That's really giving me something to think about. I do think you are flexing those same kind of improv muscles. Maybe that explains why when I eventually took improv, I wasn't as nervous because I was like, oh, I'm in a scene, as opposed to like, being called out in front of a crowd for my shoes or something.
Yeah. I think some people just. I think their brains are just wired a little differently too. Like some people just seem to take to improv and all that kind of stuff really quickly and easily. But then it's like, and I guess to tie it back into writing, like there's probably two different kind of, well, maybe even more than two, but there's probably different schools of writing where there's people who are really good at like knocking out ideas in a room. But then there are some writers who are better at like massaging them on their own and bringing it back to the,
Definitely.
Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think initially when I started, I don't think I was a great like in-room writer. I'm because I do think that once you start once you're in a room, you kind of can figure out where your strengths are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people who are in a room are like the kind of joke per minute kind of people who can just crank out like really good gags, but that's never been me. I'm more, I guess, methodical. I like to really think stuff out or kind of problem solve. And that's kind of where my strengths come from in the room. So I do think that there's a kind of moment where you have to find yourself and find out like, okay, well, maybe I'm not good at this part, but if I'm really good at like tracking story or emotional arcs or stuff like that, then that can kind of be where I focus myself for figuring out the story, and then kind of like can try to work on strengthening those other weak spots,
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear more about that before we kind of come back to your career path, because I think that's really interesting. And like, as you've been in the writer's room, but you've also now a head writer, and like, what sort of role do you have as far as like leading the team? And like we were talking about different kinds of writers and everything. Do you sort of also have to recognize people's strengths and weaknesses and, support each of the people on the team in a different way? Is that kind of part of what you do?
Yeah. A lot of times now it's kind of like, if we're breaking the story, I really want to try to figure out what makes the story work and what makes it tick, and then be able to break that down in a way where it's easily explainable to, the other writers if I'm not writing it, or the board team. So once we do the handout, if they have questions or, if they need to figure stuff out or something's not working, they feel like they can come to me and we can kind of like re-break that story or really like get a new grasp on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a matter of like, for Craig, we've been doing kind of longer overarching stories, and I've been kind of at the forefront of that in terms of like planning out where the story is going to go and what kind of beats we need to drop in, which has been really fun. And I think it shows a level of thought for like a long-term story arc that I think is really necessary to make sure that the story feels fun but doesn't drag on too long. And, like I'm working with Matt and Ben, who were the writers on Steven Universe, and they definitely know about like a long-term story arc kind of thing.
Sure.
So the fact that they, trusted me to kind of like run that for Craig is really cool too.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we've been doing this stuff with The Other Side of the Creek for 3 seasons now, and that started back in like episode 16, and now here we are, rolling up to like 120 or something, and we're still telling that story.
So it's kind of something between like an editor and directing, but specific to the writing aspect of the story. Yeah. That's awesome. And then there's probably still a degree of like politics, would you say? Like just kind of as a manager tends to have to do, you have to kind of, deal with people's personalities and things more so than you would if you were just in the room.
Yeah.
Would you say that's part of it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a lot. That writing seems like it's a lot. Well, let's roll it back. So yeah, you were in school, you were doing wrestling, you were doing stories. What was kind of the thing that got you into animation initially?
So I knew I wanted to get out here, but I didn't know how to go about it. And I'm not like a lot of people are like, yeah, I like packed up everything I have and moved to California, and I was like, I've given myself a year to make it, and that sounds absolutely terrifying to me. I am not like I don't have that. I didn't have that level of faith in myself, to be honest. So I was like, well, if I'm going to get out here, I have to figure out a way that like, to make it work. So I remember looking up one day, like I had written that spec, and I was like, well, what do you do with the spec script once you have it? And a lot of the things were like, well, maybe you can find an agent or a manager, but usually they want to rep you if you're already working, So while I was searching, I found out about the Nickelodeon writing program, which is like a fellowship at Nickelodeon where every year, like 2,000 plus people enter, and they pick maybe 3 or 4. And then you get to they move you to LA, you work at Nickelodeon for a year, you get paid to like learn, and it's just an incredible program. And I was like, this is like literally everything I need. I have to figure out, I have to enter this and try to get to the finals. And it was May, and the deadline had expired in April. So I was like, great, I'll apply next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent the year figuring out what shows I wanted to spec. And I ended up doing a spec of the show called The League on FX.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then I did a spec for Bob's Burgers.
Mm-hmm.
How much of like a show do you feel like you have to watch in order to feel comfortable to write a spec for?
I would say as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you'll, like, I did an episode of Amphibia.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ended up working on that show for freelance, and they only had the pilot done, and that was great because I got to see how those characters worked, but I only knew them for 11 minutes. So anything I did was kind of going to inform what they did, but also, like, I didn't have a lot to base it on. Whereas when I was working on these specs, I had so many episodes to kind of, like, lose myself in and find those voices. And I feel like for a spec, you're really trying to match those voices. Mm-hmm. So when I was watching, like, when I knew I was going to spec The League, I would have it on all the time. Even if I wasn't paying attention to it, even if I was writing, I'd have it on in the background so the voices are still getting ingrained in my head. So then when I'm writing scenes, I know how this character will react because I've heard them so many times.
Right.
So, when the new submission period rolled around, I submitted my specs and then kind of had to not think about them every day. And I got a call in June of 2015, and they were like, hey, we want to let you know you're like a quarterfinalist. Like out of 2,000 people, you're down to like 20-something. So I was like, this is great. And they were like, you're going to have a call with the director of the program, who was Karen Kirkland at the time. So I was like, okay, great. I'm going to have this call, and I'll, be able to show how excited I am about this. So I have the call with Karen, and it's basically like her asking me a bunch of questions and me saying no to all of them. So it was like, have you written like a movie script? No. Did you go to college? No. Do you have a sketch packet? No. Have you ever written for theater? No. Have you done this? No. Okay, bye. And that was it. And I was like, oops. It's not great.
Wait, so at that point, had you already done improv or not?
No. I hadn't done improv yet. I had wanted to, but I could never afford it. Right. So, yeah. So then I had to submit the second spec, which was my Bob's Burgers. And I guess that was strong enough to carry me through to the next round. So I became a semifinalist, and then I became a finalist. And they're like, hey, you have to fly out here. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, they said, you have to fly out here, not we're going to fly you out here. Right. So I had
Why would they pay for that? Yeah.
So I had to scrape up money at the last minute to fly to LA.
That's kind of bogus.
For these interviews.
That's not.
I stayed at that little motel across from the subway, the one at that corner.
Yeah.
So I stayed over there and then basically was at Nick for 3 days, along with the other finalists who I'm competing against, but are also my friends because they're the only people I know now. And we're doing speed interviews with some are here's you and Butch Hartman, or here's you and the head of at the head of Paramount with 8 people from the movies team asking you questions. And over the course of 3 days, we do 13 interviews, and then they're like, okay, we'll let you know who won next week. So then
13 interviews? That's
wow. Insane.
It was a lot.
You don't even have to do that much for a job.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. Yeah. Man.
And we're being graded on them. So
how did you how did that feel for you? Did you just kind of go through the motions, or did you kind of
It was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Especially that first one, because I'm I don't know what they, they're asking me questions, but I've never even been to this state, and I just flew in.
That's a culture shock.
And also I realize that it's a huge opportunity. So I'm also oh crap, don't mess up. This could change your life, but that's in the back of your head too, or you're trying to answer these questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I flew back home after 3 days, and then the next week they called me and they were like, hey, we want to let you know, you won. We want you to move out here. So I moved out here the next month, which was October 2015. Mm-hmm. I started at Nick. And for the first 6 months of the program, I was like revising the stuff I submitted, because while it was good enough to get me a job, it still wasn't like up to snuff, compared to like everyone who's been working in this industry for years. I actually still use that Bob's Burgers spec as one of my samples when I send out work.
Oh,
and
wow.
I got to take improv and sketch at the UCB, which Nickelodeon paid for, and
That's
a bunch
cool.
of other classes.
Is that part of the program?
Yep.
And oh, that's awesome.
And I got to, meet a ton of people at Nickelodeon, which was really cool. And then 6 months into it, I got to join the room for Harvey Beaks, which was the best possible room I could have gotten. Everybody in that room was super great
That's a very
and
good room.
very friendly and taught me so much, and immediately like welcomed me. They were like, hey, just so you know, like, you don't have to like, a lot of times it's like, okay, well, if you're in the program and you're kind of just in on the room, you kind of just, sit in the corner and listen and, kind of pay attention. And at Harvey, they were like, you're one of us. You can pitch.
Yeah.
You can, if you have any ideas, feel free, speak up. As far as we're concerned, you're one of the writers.
Oh,
Which is great.
that's probably a lot of Donnie too, because
Yes.
Donnie McKaylee is just such a gem.
Donnie, yeah, one of the greatest people. Like, couldn't have been a better mentor for me. And also that room had like Amalia Lavari and Kevin Kramer and Conrad Montgomery. Like, everybody was just super nice.
Carson
Montgomery. Yes, thank you. And so incredible room, incredible way to start. And I ended up, after like 2 months there, Donnie pushed for me to be able to do a freelance episode. So I got to do a freelance episode of Harvey, which ended up getting boarded by Nick Samita and Ashley Anstey for episode Photo Finished, which was my first ever TV credit, which was incredible.
Wow. How, like, when your episode aired, like, did you like tell your family? And
Oh, yeah.
It's a big deal.
I told everybody. It's funny because it took forever to air over here because Nickelodeon had no idea what to do with Harvey Beaks. And it actually aired in Africa before it aired over here.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think I watched it online before I got to watch it on TV. But eventually it did, air over here, and my family was like, taking pictures of the TV and all that kind of stuff. Super proud of me. Now I'm on a show that comes out on a regular basis and no one watches it, but it's fun.
Yeah, that's how it goes, right? Yeah. Like once it becomes routine, everyone's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
That's always the bummer. But still, you made it. Yeah, that's a crazy journey. What were you doing before you got that writing program?
I was actually working in Detroit at a Target as a security guard, which wasn't a terrible job. It was pretty fun. But yeah, I did that for about 6 months, and then I moved out here. It's right before that I had another job at a plant, which I absolutely hated. And that was around the time that I was submitting for the writing program. And I remember like working on my submission and being like, I can't do this current job. Like, I can't do it anymore. Like, this can't be my life. So I have to put everything I can into the submission and make it funny enough that it, changes the way my life is going. And luckily, that's kind of what happened, because I knew, like, I could see, like, okay, I'm going to look up and 30 years will go by and I have been like working this security job and I don't want that. So I have to do whatever I can to kind of change that here. And, the Nick writing program and the thing I submitted allowed me to make that happen.
I forgot, like, how you became aware of the program. How did you find out about it?
Google.
Nice.
I was just like, what do you do with the spec? And then I Google, and then like on page 3, it was like Nickelodeon writing program. And I was like, what's this? And then I saw that they had like a list of alumnus from like 2004 or so that had all written on like things like Modern Family and Avatar: The Last Airbender and all types of stuff. And I was like, this program looks legit. Like, and it was also, it's free to submit. So I was like, what do I have to lose? Like, I have everything to gain. I should, apply for this thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you always kind of like, did you first think of live action and then when you saw the program, you were like, oh, cartoons, or did you always enjoy cartoons?
That's funny because when you start the program, everyone asks you, do you want to do live action or animation? And I was always the person who like skated the middle line, or I was like, I like them both, which feels like such a cop out answer. But, you know, like, I
Cast a wider net.
yeah, I mean, and I do. Like, I think that live action's cool because, you know, there's an instant gratification of like writing a thing and seeing it filmed and it comes out. But, you know, with animation, you kind of have that like year-long wait minimum, it seems like. But,
Yeah.
you know, like I've grown up like as a fan of animation, as a fan of voice acting, you know, like I was that guy who would hear, you know, oh, I know that voice, that's Phil Lamar, or I know that, you know, that's Gray Delisle or whatever. So growing up, I always had an affinity for animation, and I'm one of the people who like didn't stop, you know, I didn't stop watching cartoons when I turned like 11 or whatever, when everyone's like, you turn 13 and then you don't look at cartoons anymore, according to execs. You know, I never kind of stopped that. And then, so I was kind of like, you know, I appreciate both. But then they were like, well, if you got placed on like an animated show, what show would you want to go to? And I said Harvey Beaks. So then later when I got to work on Harvey, and I really got to see like all the work that goes into creating an animated show, and like seeing how much work the board artists are putting in, and props and design, and you know, like all the facets of it up close, and really like getting to appreciate it. Really, I was like, well, there's nothing else I want to do than work in animation. Like, it's so many people working together for such a incredible like end goal. And it's just really cool to see, and it really gave me a whole new appreciation for animation.
Sure.
That is so
Yeah.
cool. I was also wondering when you were working on like your spec scripts to submit to the program, did you have anyone like proofreading them, or did you have like friends that you showed the scripts to, or were you just like just going at it all by yourself?
I showed my lovely fiance Felicia, and I showed my buddy Joe, and a friend of mine from this trade school I went with, Devon. They all kind of looked it over for me, especially Devon for the lead, because it's a show about fantasy football, and I don't watch football. So he's like my football guy that I was like, okay, does this sound good? Does this check out? But yeah, I was lucky enough to have a few people that I really trusted their opinion on comedy, as well as like their opinion on like storytelling, and just trusted them to like find my numerous typos throughout the document.
Did you ever have anyone be like, this isn't really funny?
Never in my life. No, I'm just kidding.
It has never happened. Permanently funny. Yeah, how did you get the head writer gig on Craig? What kind of led to that?
I started on Craig. Actually met with Matt and Ben back when the show was technically still in development. So yeah, I finished up at Nickelodeon for my year. In the last 6 months, I got to work on like Harvey, and I worked on Glitch Techs. And then I was kind of looking for work once I finished up the program. And I ended up doing some freelance over at Cartoon Network for Craig of the Creek. So the episode that I wrote was technically when they were still in development, but it became this episode called Too Many Treasures, which introduces the Junk Lord, and ironically the 10 Speeds, considering I voiced one of them. But
I was going to ask you about that later. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that.
Put a pin.
But yeah, so when I started working on Craig, I guess they were trying out a few different writers, and then they decided on bringing me on as the staff writer. So for the first season, I was a staff writer, and our head writer or story editor was Shauna McGarry. And we worked together for about maybe 7 or 8 months. And then Shauna got another gig. So she ended up leaving, and the head writer gig was kind of open. And I was suggesting some people that they could bring in for it, because this was also my first like official staff writing gig. And, you know, they were kind of, after talking to them and our producer, Kelly, we're kind of like, well, we were thinking that we want you to be the story editor, and then we bring in a new staff writer. And I was kind of unsure about it because I had only been staff writing for not even a full year. I was like, I don't know if I can, handle everything that comes with it. But they were like, we trust you and we believe in you, and like, this is a big opportunity, but if you would rather we kind of like bring in another story editor, we'll do that, but just kind of give it some time. So I thought about it and I talked it over with my fiance, and I decided that like I would rather take the opportunity and risk failing than not take it and always wonder, Mm-hmm. So from there, I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then as of season 2, I became the story editor. I started overseeing the freelancers we were bringing in for a while. It took us a while to get another staff writer. So I was kind of like juggling both jobs at the moment for a bit. So I handled a lot of the writing for the first half or so of season 2, in addition to kind of like, I wanted to make sure that like our board artists got a chance to talk to somebody. And a lot of times Matt and Ben would be busy because they are overseeing the show. So I would also go around and speak with all the board artists and see if there were any stories that they wanted to tell.
That's great.
And make sure that we were like, because we're all working together to create something special. So I want to make sure that they have as much input as, me or any other writer. But also, like, in the years after that, we've even opened that up to, like, having meetings with props and everybody to make sure that we're telling really fun, innovative stories.
Yeah, why not?
So, yeah, basically I became story editor at season 2, started going to voice records and co-directing. I would sit in on animatic sits sometimes, in addition to handling, like, the writing stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a hell of a, that's a quick jump. Like I would like if that kind of offer came to me, I would just like grab it. But I think it's very, very respectful of you to like consider it and think about whether or not you're like ready for it. I would just dive in and then fuck it up. Like I don't stop and think that much.
I had a lot of imposter syndrome, so that's where that came into.
We all have that. Yeah. I get that. I think, but yeah, I mean, you deserve it, and the fact that you've been there for this long and are nailing it,
thank you,
is proof that you belong.
Thank you.
Do you still do improv, or did you mostly do it during when you were in the program?
I just did it during the program. It's one of those things that I wanted to do more, but it's so time consuming, and like around the time that I stopped was the time that my fiance moved out here from Michigan, because I came ahead and then she joined me like 6 or 7 months afterwards. So it was also like, well, now if I'm going to improv, that's time I don't get to spend with her after I get off work. So I'm like, it just kind of fell to the wayside. But I did like it a lot, and I do, well, not currently because we're in quarantine, but I did go see like a lot of improv shows because I do kind of like I do appreciate it as an art form too.
Right, but you do play D&D, which
I
is kind of like improv to some extent.
Definitely is.
Yeah, I was in a D&D group for 2.5 years on Craig, where we were meeting like pretty regularly every Thursday with some of the coolest people I know. I could name drop everyone, but it's like 8 people, so it would take way too long. But they know who they are. So yeah, that was kind of how I got my improv. I scratched that improv itch.
I wanted to ask about Cannonball, and I want to know if the character came first or if you were an inspiration for the character.
The answer is both. The character came first. They actually had like designs for the 10 speeds, but hadn't used them in the pilot, I believe. So the episode where I wrote was the first time they kind of are used, but Cannonball himself didn't really have a personality until around episode 24 or so. We did Creek Kart Racers, and we decided to put Cannonball in as one of the opposition for Craig in this, or JP in this kind of racing Mario Kart episode. And I believe it was boarded by Dina Beck and Angel why am I blanking on Angel's last name? Lorenzana. And they were trying to figure out like a character for Cannonball. And I remember them being like, well, can we kind of just base them off of you? And I was like, sure.
Can we just steal you?
And around the time, I would say that stuff was dope a lot. So his catchphrase became, that's dope. So, you know, I was like, okay, well, I've wanted to voice act literally since I was a kid. So maybe I'll get to voice Cannonball. And they actually were like, well, we're going to do auditions for Cannonball. So they started auditioning people. And then eventually some stuff fell through and I got to do it. They were like, can you do Cannonball? And I was like, I was waiting for you to ask me forever ago.
You just stand up out of your chair slowly.
Yeah, finally.
I'm ready. Yeah.
The role I was born to play. The character based on me.
Sometimes that's the best stuff.
And yeah, so I got to do Cannonball for the first time, which was like by myself in the booth because it happened so late that they recorded me separately. And that was fun, but nerve-wracking because it's very, very, very quiet inside that booth. So you can hear everything, and you can't hear what they're saying. So you're like, oh, God, am I bad? Did I mess up? Am I really terrible? Are they
they'll be like
me?
talking to each other like behind the glass. And you're like, what is this? What is happening?
And I've been on the other side of the glass. So I know what's being said. And I'm still like, oh, no, they hate me. So when in actuality, it's just like, oh, yeah, can we get them to say that louder? Yeah, okay. Could you say this louder? And that's it. But yeah, so I got to do Cannonball, and then he's come back quite a few times, which has been really fun voicing him, as well as like other characters I've gotten to play. One of whom is like this teen named Gibson, who is one of Bernard's friends. So I got to be in the booth recording with Phil Lamar, which was like,
oh wow, that's great.
Like a childhood dream of mine.
That's insane. Yeah. You have such a funny way of doing Cannonball. I love how, like, it's the monotone is the perfect, the sort of like neutral, like thanks, I'm named after my grandma. Like it's just so fucking funny.
I decided to do. So what's funny is I was like, well, I don't know if I don't have a lot of range when it comes to voice acting, and I was like, well, maybe I should save my voice, or if I ever get to do something with my voice. So then I was like, I'll make Cannonball's voice deeper, which in hindsight is ridiculous. This kid's voice would be that deep.
Oh yeah, it's so
funny.
So
I deepened my voice to do Cannonball's voice.
Yeah.
So whereas I would be like, oh, that's dope, he would be like, yo, that's dope. What's up, Craig?
That's dope.
What up, Craig?
Yeah.
So, which is ridiculous.
I feel like we all knew that kid, though.
Yeah, exactly. I was that kid.
Yeah.
Were you making your voice deeper on purpose as a kid?
No, my voice was really like, I was like prideful of how high I could hit some notes, and then one day it just went away.
Yeah. That'll happen. That's great. Well, I'd love to get into sort of the stuff that inspires you and the stuff that like gets you excited. Like you mentioned that you like wrestling, and I assume you're still interested in that stuff, right?
Yep.
The storytelling aspect of it. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I was drawn to about it, but never really realized. You know, that's another one of those things where I'm like, oh, I loved storytelling, and never like it showed up in ways that I didn't realize, because storytelling is such a big part of pro wrestling. It's just, you know, it's like a play. Everything, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy, and, you know, it's kind of like drawing that emotion from the crowd and telling that story. And, yeah, so that's been a big inspiration of mine. I still keep up with wrestling. Another big inspiration of mine when I was growing up was the TV show Static Shock, which was like the first time I felt like I saw a black main character who looked like someone I knew, and, you know, like was somebody that I could really relate to. It's just like an inner city kid. And this is another moment where I'm like, oh, the signs were there that I wanted to be a writer and didn't know. But like, when that show started coming on, my mom told me about it because she had found out she had found an online article about Dwayne McDuffie, who is from Detroit, and how he like grew up and basically started the show, and she gave me that article. And I remember like holding that article in my room and reading it and seeing like, okay, this is this guy who's from the place I am, and now he's created this show with a superhero that I really like. And that's another moment of like, now I can look back and be like, okay, I can see how this inspired me without me realizing it. But at the moment, it's just like, oh yeah, this is cool. And like, I never thought twice about it, but subconsciously it's been locked in there for years,
Yeah, man. Well, representation matters. Like you see it. Even for me, like I didn't know that you could be like from an immigrant from Russia and make a career. Like that's felt unachievable. Mm-hmm. And then I there was an article about Genndy Tartakovsky that I read when I was like 8 or 9 or something, and I was like, oh, okay. Like if this dude can be an immigrant and make a career and make all this stuff. So yeah, I totally get it. I think that's very important. Those kinds of like examples. Is there other stuff beyond animation that you find really interesting? You mentioned live action, but is there any other stuff even beyond that?
That kind of inspired me?
Yeah, kind of like, inspires you, like gives you ideas.
Comics or music or any kind of like art form?
Oh yeah, definitely comics.
Or even real life. Like I wonder like if there's, I don't know, that's something that I like to ask. Is there like, when you were working as a security guard, was there like things that were that you would see and would like inspire you in terms of like character or like just kind of like funny moments, or I don't know?
I feel like I had a lot of because I didn't go to college, so I kind of joined the workforce pretty early, and I feel like I got a lot of really unique experiences from like I worked at the airport for a few years.
Oh wow.
And I worked with so many different people of different backgrounds, and also like people who were around my age, but also like way older than me. And, coming out of high school when like everyone is like barely like has a like kind of patchy beard because like everything's not fully connecting yet. It's like, working with people who have like, 50 years of experiences on this earth. Like that was a really like interesting wake up call to me. And like, again, like to one of the people I met at the airport was my friend Earl, who was like probably my best friend at that job. And like we would hang out and talk, and he'd always give me advice. And he was just like a very dear friend. And conversely, on Craig of the Creek, Craig's granddad is named Earl because I named him after that guy because he was such a big inspiration to me. So like that's another moment of like pulling from my life and these people that mean a lot to me and kind of like putting them into this world and making that a person that means a lot to Craig,
Yeah, those kinds of connections always have the best, like, the juiciest character building.
Yeah.
Sure. That's great. Is there, what other stuff specific, I guess, to animation do you find the most inspiring?
God. This is going to be the one that takes me forever to come up with
I like
an
to
answer.
ask, like, to make it maybe easier, is like, was there ever a moment in a piece of media that like really blew you away and made you be like, wow, like I want to do something like that, and you're just kind of trying to like live up to that?
Without taking us right back to Static Shock, which I just talked about.
I mean, that's fair. Hey, if that's it, that's it,
Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Spider-Verse was
great.
Yeah, like that and also this isn't animated, but I'm gonna cheat and say Black Panther too.
That's totally fine.
Both of those films meant so much to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like even as an adult, like to see that again, that representation.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Black Panther like 6 times at the theater.
Holy shit! Okay.
And Spider-Verse like 4.
Yeah.
So like they meant a lot to me at a time where we were making Craig too, and I was like, well, this can the same way Static means a lot to me, Craig is going to mean a lot to somebody because it'll be that representation. So for me, it's just been making sure that like people know that one, people see themselves, and 2, I want to be able to like do as many interviews and panels and things that I can to kind of be the Dwayne McDuffie article to someone else that article was to me. Where it's like, oh, this is a thing I can pursue. This is a thing that's achievable. Like this guy did it. this guy who didn't go to college, he was like a security guard, was able to figure out a way to make it work. So
Yeah.
I can too. Like, that to me is the most important thing.
I guarantee you that you will be that for somebody for sure, because I think it's very, very impressive, very inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah. We had a bunch of good questions.
Let's hear them.
While I get to those, we like to ask about creative block and like, what does it look like to you and how do you kind of deal with it? In your case, writing stories and breaking down stories.
Oh, man. I think for me, the thing that's worked is kind of distracting myself from the story. Like, I feel like if I'm running into a wall, a lot of times I'll feel the need to kind of sit here and be like, well, I got to figure out like what's stopping me here. I got to figure out how to kind of get through that block. But a lot of times it really comes when I am stepping away, whether it's, taking a walk or reading something else that I enjoy, like reading a fun comic or manga, or just watching something that I really like. And it'll free up my brain enough to when I come back and have a second look, or even while I'm focusing on something else, the little nugget of the idea I'm working on will finally pop. And so for me, it's just like, instead of trying to force it, I'll go do something else and kind of like free that brain space to kind of figure it out.
Yeah. This is actually a question that ties into that nicely from @DimpsDoodles. Did you ever struggle early on with finishing scripts, having extreme self-doubt about your work? How did you overcome it?
So much self-doubt, even now. I think it's tough because a lot of times that self-doubt comes from believing that you are doing something wrong, or you are, you could be doing something better. But as long as you're putting like everything, like if you feel confident, like I'm putting in, the top level of work that I can. This is what I'm proud of this. And a lot of times you can be proud of something and someone else will still hate it, and vice versa. You could do some work that you hate and they're like, this is fantastic. It's just about like committing and doing the work that you can the best way you know how. Sure. And, there's always a way to kind of push yourself to get better, but, you can only do what you can do. And so I kind of look at it as like, I'm going to do the best work that I can, and I'm going to learn along the way. Whether I mess up or whether it's great, I'm still going to take something away from it. Why did this work, or why didn't it work? And that's kind of the way I kind of approach things like that. It's just, everything's a learning lesson,
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about that yesterday too. It's just like, the last year has been such a drag, and it feels, I think everyone in their own personal narrative, I assume, is obviously had to halt a lot of things, and it like really sucks. But like, I feel like everyone's gone through this process of like figuring out what matters to them. And despite it being such a miserable year, I see a lot of people coming out of it still like doing a little bit better in some ways than they were before, just because it like makes you be a little, little introspective and stuff. And so it's nice to see that even through this horrible quarantine pandemic year, people still manage to like come out learning something. I think that's good.
Definitely.
Derek Malik Johnson asked, what are some series that you would love to work on? Or if you got to pick some older series to bring back, what would be your picks to come back and work on? Static Shock, right?
Yeah.
I know you're going to say.
There's a list. Static Shock. Jeez. I loved the most recent DuckTales. I would have loved to have been able to do something over there. Darkwing Duck is a thing that I've loved since I was a child. I would love to work on. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I kind of got to check off my bucket list, but not really, because I did an episode, but it didn't come out. What else? There's so many other things. I'll just limit it with those. I don't want to like keep us here all day.
Sure. Well, I mean, you want to put your name on everything you like, I assume.
Yeah.
I sure do. But let's see.
Planet Panic.
Well, yeah, obviously. Whenever that happens, you're on the list, buddy.
Please.
You're definitely on the list. Glad I have so many talented friends. It's like I wish they'd just let me make my show. There's so many talented people I know that would just like really make it amazing. The narrator said, what's something you did that helped you in your career, and what's something you'd recommend for people who are pursuing that same or similar career? I guess in your case, writing.
I know we've talked about it a few times. I'm going to say improv.
Sure.
Improv helped me a lot. I was very shy, even in starting my career when I believe I was like 25 at the time. And I was still very like, I had a hard time like walking up to people and starting conversations. But, I was always worried I was going to say something stupid. Whereas now I've done like panels and things in front of like literally hundreds of people. And I really attribute that to improv. Like it taught me that like, moments are fleeting. If I say something stupid, I'll think about it more than anybody else probably will. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of just out there and then it disappears. So it really helped me feel like a freedom to just kind of like have conversations, talk to people. And that's so much of this job, like meeting other people, but also like in a room, like feeling the confidence to speak up and pitch something. Because early on, there would be a lot of times where I'd be like, oh, I should pitch this idea. Wait, no, they're going to think this is stupid. And there's nothing worse than wanting to pitch something and not pitching it, and then someone else pitching the exact same thing. And, and they're like, that's great. And you're like, God, oh my God.
That's my idea. God, yeah, you never know. God, I do that all the time. Yeah, like the second guessing and like it's just not worth it. Yeah. It's crazy how much imposter syndrome plagues everyone, because it's just, I feel like I constantly I need validation from people, because like I will have ideas that never come to fruition because I just feel like nobody will like it, and then I'll put out something like basic online and people are like, wow, this is great, and I'm like, you like this shit? But it's like you never know, like it's the plague of being a creative person, is you feel like you're never good enough.
Yeah. And then you're surrounded by people who are making such cool stuff that you're like,
that's the thing.
Well, obviously, like, that's great. No one's gonna like my thing. This is incredible. Like,
that's the thing. It's like we're surrounded. It gets worse the sort of further up you go, because you're sort of surrounding yourself with even more talented people, which you should, because you want to kind of rise to a different level. But yeah, then you have a new expectation that you've set for yourself, because you're now surrounded by all these other talented assholes. That's just kind of how it goes. From at Phil Rinda, friend of the show, what's a story that Jeff has wanted to tell for a long time but still hasn't had the chance to?
Hi, Phil. Oh man, do you mean like a story about me, or like a story
I don't know.
about? I'll tell a story about me, because I haven't spoken about myself enough.
Go for it.
I guess I'm only thinking of this because there's a drawing of Jeff Rosenstock.
Somebody had requested it. Jeff is awesome.
I love Jeff, and I actually wasn't super familiar with his work before I got on Craig, but he's our composer, so I kind of got to see some of his stuff from Craig, but I didn't really know his music outside of Craig. And then I got to meet him, and Jeff was super cool. Like, we get along great. He's super nice. We love his wife, Christine. Like, everything about Jeff is awesome. So I started listening to his music, and then I was like, holy shit, this music's really good. Yeah. So, like, I got to know him as a person, and then I got to, like, really appreciate his music afterwards, which I think I enjoyed it even more, because I'm like, oh, this is my friend. He makes great music, as opposed to like, I'm friends with this great musician. Same thing happened with you. So Jeff has an album that came out last year called No Dream. And they released he has a hotline for it called the No Dream Hotline. It's like 469 No Dream or something. And you can call it, and it'll be like a person that's like, hey, like, are you suffering from this or this or this? We can help you with it. Like, hit this number that corresponds with it. But the person on that number is me. So right before he announced his album, he just kind of like dropped it, he reached out to me and was like, hey, we're going to do this thing. Would you want, like, I was cutting some episodes and I heard like Cannonball, and I was like, oh, maybe Jeff would want to do this. Would you want to do this hotline for me? So I was like, yeah, sure. So he sent me all this stuff that he had written up, and I just recorded all of it and sent it back. And now I'm on the hotline for his album.
God, that is such a good story.
And he sent me the album like a week in advance, so I was just like rocking out to it. His album.
I got to see him live in San Francisco like years ago, like 7 years ago or something, and it was awesome. Yeah, he's definitely an influence on my band Q Bomb, and I hope to meet him someday. It feels close enough, that it's like it could happen. But yeah, Jeff is great. All the Jeffs are great. That's not true. That's probably not true. There's probably some real shit Jeffs out there.
Bezos. Jeff
Some
Bezos.
real just like there's some real never mind. The two Jeffs we've spoken about here are great. Let's see. These are all really good questions, and I want to try to get to as many as we can. V, is there any that you wanted to ask specifically?
On the let me see.
It's a nice tune.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
As I think, oh my gosh, this is a complete tension, completely unrelated to the episode, but like doing, being in this pandemic. Hey, you know what? This can be an interesting question. How is it like for you to be a head writer during this crazy time? Like, do you guys have a writer's room with through Zoom?
Mm-hmm. We do. We meet we meet Monday, Tuesdays, and Fridays on Zoom, usually for about 3 hours a day, minimum. Not also counting when we have like pitches on like Wednesdays and Thursdays. So we'll be in those meetings too. So usually like I am at my computer in meetings or writing for the full like 40 hours a week, which, this used to be my gaming computer, so now I never play video games on it.
Oh no, it's been cursed.
It feels like work, or I'm like, oh.
That sucks. Yeah.
But, we've been fortunate enough to keep working. And the cool thing about the show is like we basically started working from home and never really missed a beat. Like we still got to like jump right into pitches. We've been doing records. Like everything is still kind of like chugged along. So it's been really cool. And I do hope that it'll allow people to kind of like be able to work from home more and not have to move all the way to expensive as California to.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw a question like that, like about having to be in person in the room. Do you what is your opinion about a writer's room on Zoom versus in person?
I think there are some hurdles to a Zoom room where it's like, early on, I feel like people would like go to speak at the same time, or everybody's like stumbling, or then you're like, oh wait, no, you go. Oh no, you go. And then it's just like 5 minutes of people being nice.
That's why I hate Zoom calls. It like drives me crazy.
But I do think that there's like, if more people can break into this industry and not have to be here, because that's such a big part of it. Like there's so many, I can't imagine how many talented people there have been that just haven't gotten the opportunity just based on proximity. Yeah. I literally could have been one of those people if not for the Nick Writing Program. So I think it's like, I think it's cool. I'm open to it. We were able to work with somebody who lived in New York a few months back via Craig for the Zoom room. So yeah, I'm into it.
The Zoom room.
Zoom room.
I like that. At Extremely Uncanny asked, what is your favorite clique of kids on Craig of the Creek?
I'm biased. No.
You're biased.
I'm gonna, I'm still gonna pick a group with me, but I'm gonna pick the Ice Pop Trio.
Okay.
That was a really important episode. I wanted to do something with, I love Kelsey and JP, obviously, but I wanted to do something with just 3 black kids as like the focal point of the story, and not just, the ones that Craig's related to either, just like friends of his. So doing Ice Pop Trio with Sparkle Cadet and Cannonball meant a lot to me. I also vehemently pitched not using Cannonball because I didn't want to seem like I was being biased. I was like,
you keep putting your own.
Yeah. Every time there's a Cannonball idea, I'm like, oh, what if we did it with this character? Because I don't want to be like the guy that's just pitching his own character. But I get outvoted. So, it is what it is.
Sure. Cannonball. Yeah. There's actually a question from @Son of Tutu Choppy. Do you plan on further pursuing a career in voice acting, or is Cannonball just a fun one-off type situation?
I would love to do more voice acting. It's like I said, it's been something I've been interested in since I was a kid. It's so fun, and I know so many voice actors that are doing such incredible work. So when I see their stuff, it just excites me even more. So I would love to do more stuff outside of Craig and Fungi's. I've been reading a lot of manga, so now I'm like, ooh, should I start trying to get into like doing anime voice acting? But yeah, so
that is such a different.
It's completely different.
Yeah.
I think it would shred my voice, but
yeah, it's a lot of screaming. I think.
I was gonna ask you, by the way, because I remember on Twitter you were asking for like manga recommendations. When did you kind of start reading manga?
I started really like I read a bit here and there, but I really committed around maybe like 2.5 years ago when I started reading My Hero Academia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was watching that, and then I kind of like read all of it, and then I started reading like 80 other things. I read Death Note recently. Reading Kaiju number 8.
Mm-hmm.
I loved your tweet about like, why did no one tell me to stop halfway?
Yeah, Death Note takes a dive.
That is so true. Like, I was lucky that like when I read Death Note, someone told me like, this is the moment when you stop.
God, I was so mad.
It gets bad
because there were so many moments where I was like, okay, I could stop now and like just look at the wiki, and I was like, no, it must turn around. Like, there's so many like little seeds that he left to like pay off later. He's gonna pay them off, and then they didn't, and I was just like, huh. And then I got a migraine like the next day, and I was like, this must be a rage migraine.
I watched the anime first and I loved it, but then like I think episode 26 where like the big thing happens, we won't spoil it, but like the big thing happens, and then it's like, oh well, it's the end, and like great, it's a bittersweet, well, not even bittersweet, it's like a painful ending, but then it's just like now we're gonna keep going and it's just gonna become pointless and it's just like, what? We're gonna keep doing more of the same, and it's like, I don't want to do that.
And it was literally just like, I said this online, it was literally just like having your cake and eating it too, where it's like, we're gonna do this thing, but also like not, because this character is also like the same character.
It's the same, but less interesting. Have you ever read Bakuman?
I have not. It's on my list. I got a ton of recommendations.
Yeah, that's on the Shonen Jump app, which I love. You should sponsor us, Shonen Jump.
Yeah.
But it's the same writer and the same artist as Death Note, and it's awesome. It's got the same like energy, but it's just about like two guys trying to get a manga, like trying to get it popular, and it's like it was so relatable and so fucking awesome. I think you would like it.
Some of the obviously like manga is like, some of it is a little bit problematic, but
that's just manga.
But the first 1 or 2 volumes are really fun, I think. Because it's like kind of like the backstage of how to make manga. That's like the most interesting part to me. I read the whole manga just because there's like a side character that I really like, because I think he's so funny. But yeah, the story, the best of the story is just the first 1 or 2 volumes, I think.
Is this your way of telling me don't read it all, V?
I like it all. I don't know. I don't know what.
I would say you don't have to, because, well, I don't know. The way I see it is like, it starts as this like, well, this is how we make manga, and then it just kind of becomes a soap opera kind of.
I'll say this. I know what you're talking about. I think that like there's a relationship drama aspect to it that is bullshit. Like you could completely take it out and it loses nothing, and it's stupid. Like throughout the whole thing, it's just stupid. Is that what you're talking about, V? All the stuff with the girl?
Yeah, but even like, because, well, I think if I were to kind of like break it down, it's like they set up the motivation of the character to be like, oh my god, well, I'm gonna work really, really hard on my manga because I am in love with you, and we can only be together when you get to voice act my
that
character.
That stuff is lame. But I feel like I don't really care about any of it, and
but that's like one of the big, because they do end up getting a manga pretty fast, so they can go into like the backstage. Like the first motivation of them getting a manga is gone pretty fast. So the only remaining motivation for them is that like love story, I think. So
I don't know about that because I think it changes. Anyway, whatever.
anyway, this is not
a topic
about,
for
yeah.
I think it's great all the way through. It's just it's not perfect. I also feel like a lot of that stuff might be editorial. Like we need to have like a romance. You know, it just feels a little like tacked on. But definitely check it out. And if you get sick of it, it's don't force yourself by no means. Do you, we asked you about your voice acting goals, but like, what are your kind of goals in general with your career, with your writing, with pitching? Like, what do you want to do in the future?
I mean, I really want to, I think for a while, I'm the kind of guy who was always kind of happy to like, I was like, I don't really want to pitch a show. I kind of just like working on other people's shows. I do feel like that's changed a bit, just kind of with experience. There are some kind of stories that I do want to tell. I would like to show run. I would like to, there's characters I really want to work with in an animated capacity. I recently got to do a comic for DC Comics where I got to write for Red Hood, who's one of my favorite comic book characters.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I actually pitched a show with Red Hood last year, but it never got any traction. So there's characters like Red Hood, like Static, like, superheroes that I would love to tell those stories with, as well as like, just something. I think I've had a lot of fun writing on Craig of the Creek, but I do think that there's part of me that wants to kind of stray away from the slice of life stuff eventually and do something maybe a bit more action focused, just to kind of stretch my legs and see what else is out there once I do finish Craig. But Craig also looks to be going, hopefully, for 1 million years. So I don't think there's any issues there either. But yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, it just keeps going. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or plug?
What can I plug? I'll talk about the comic again. I did a story for DC Comics, Truth and Justice, which is currently available on Comixology, chapters 10, 11, and 12. It will also drop in print form on May 17th, I believe, as DC Comics Truth and Justice number 4. I'm also, keep watching Craig of the Creek on Cartoon Network or HBO Max. And I guess follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Mr. Jeff Trammell. If you like Instagram, it's drawings of me that my friends have done because I can't draw. Gene, I believe, is already represented on there. I'm sure there'll be a lot more after seeing all the stuff you guys have drawn today.
Yeah, there was a few. There was quite a few. You're fun to draw. I don't know.
Well, thank you.
You got a good presence. Well, that's the end of this creative block. Thanks to Jeff for being our guest and sharing his story.
And thanks to our listeners. Follow us on Twitter. That's @CreativeBlock, creative without the vowels, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to my sister Clemens for editing the podcast.
Please subscribe to the channel if you love our content. I've been your host, Gene.
And I was V. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.